Hello, advanced watercolor students. I have some things to go over with you. A lot of things as you're starting the class. Welcome. I'm excited you came back for the next level of watercolor. It's such a challenging medium that it's important to keep building on the techniques and color systems that you learned in the first class in 25A. Projects in this group are going to be longer, portfolio studies, more complex, and you'll have to take a look at a lot of issues in terms of drawing, rendering, proportions, techniques, color systems, and as always using that pale saturation and leaving a lot of white, always strategizing where your white will be. So every subject has the same concept. It's never really about the subject, it's about how you manage the composition, the space, and all those amazing things that you can do with watercolor. But we will have subjects, and the first project is an elaborate floral series. You're going to do 3 separate paintings with 3 separate value and color systems. You may do them several times each till you get the one you really want. They can be related thematically. It could be all the same type of flower. It can be a variation. But they're going to be handled with that transparent approach. Some of the examples I put in the assignment module are a little heavy-handed. The color can be a little oversaturated, but I thought some of the techniques were so beautiful and they use the space in such an interesting way I wanted to include those. There will be some abstract techniques, but also a lot of traditional ones. The first thing you're going to want to do is start out with your pencil and a piece of paper. Now, the size, the format of these flowers is up to you. You don't want them to be super tiny, but it's a good idea to have them be relating to each other. You could have 1 large one in the middle, 2 on the sides that are the same scale. You could have 3 all the same scale. You could have tall, narrow ones that tie together in some way. As long as you meet the requirements, you can be super creative about the process, and we want to make sure it's accurate. Now, if you're still feeling a little insecure about rendering and getting things right, you can always start with a grid and using an image. If you're using a real-life flower, you don't have the option of doing a grid, unless you take a picture first and print it. There's some beautiful imagery online, on Pinterest, and everywhere online. But I'm going to go over some of the do's and don'ts in terms of what you select. If it's helpful, you can print them in the color scheme that you're doing. The first one's black and white, so you want to find an image that's black and white. Or if you have a flower you super love, you can print it in black and white instead of color and work from that directly. But you don't want to be working in value from a color flower and vice versa. You can also print all 3 in black and white and simply use, well, actually the third one I want you to print in color, but the second one you could switch your monochromatic color scheme and just use value. The third one definitely we're going to have to print in color. I bought a really cheap printer on Amazon. I had it shipped here, and I just printed these, and they're gorgeous. I was really surprised how accurate the color was. I prefer having a print than working from my phone. It's just hard to do. And I prefer drawing the subject multiple times before I actually draw it on watercolor paper, because you don't want to waste your paper and you don't want to see a bunch of pencil lines that are heavy. Another option is creating that handmade carbon by rubbing pencil on the back, flipping it over, and using pen. Sometimes it makes a little dent in the paper though, so that's an option. Or get a piece of carbon paper and be delicate with your pressure. Now the thing is, you only need 1 sheet over and over and over and over, and they usually make you buy a whole pack, so I didn't put it on the list. I just gave instructions for how to create your own carbon if you choose to draw with a grid and then transfer. But I find that if you draw it enough, by the time you get to the paper, it's familiar enough that you can lightly draw it, and if it gets too heavy, just lightly erase, because we just don't want to pill up the paper or create dents in it. You can always see the dents if you move things later. And instead of using an eraser, what I do is draw a gesture with a pencil, and as it gets closer to accuracy, I switch into different colors or markers or whatever, watercolor pencils, anything to create a different color or value without having to keep erasing. It kind of takes away from the gestural element. Of course, when you get onto the actual paper, I would use an eraser if it gets a little out of control, but definitely a clean white one, not like a, not one of those that gets all dirty. Fingerprints are a problem. I already got fingerprints on here. So you want to try to keep it clean, especially if you're working with a drawing class at the same time. Okay. There's so many things I wish I could tell you. I always feel like I have to talk so much because in class it just sort of naturally evolves, but here I want to try to cover as much as I can, so I tend to talk a lot on these things, so I apologize for that. Something you want to look for. Now this one I wanted to print in black and white, but for some reason it printed in sepia, which actually is really gorgeous. And I'm working smaller, so it all fits in here. I find that it's a little easier to see. But this I found to be stunning. Not because it's a flower at all, but because I see opportunities for technique in my black and white study. It's great to just use that one value, that one dot of black for the whole thing, and paper for the white, and more water for the grays, because you can kind of get back used to the medium without worrying about the whole palette. Now, the reason I love it is this shape. Look at that shape. It's like you can't even name what an interesting shape it is. It's almost like a bat trapezoid shape. And it's like, it's so engaging that I don't care about all this. It's the negative space that's going to be the basis for the picture. Now, what's very design-wise strategic is how this goes off the edge, but doesn't hit the edge. Classic design technique, off the edge without creating an awkward moment. So you're drawing in not just your drawing, your watercolor background, but also your sense of composition and design and all those strategies. Again, check out this shape, very dynamic. This one goes off there. There's a lot of lights and whites that gives us an opportunity to manipulate that space. Just because the background's dark in a picture doesn't mean you have to make it dark. And in all three of your flowers, you might leave the background white, who knows? But you just want to make sure your saturation is gentle. Look at this little flip thing. Goes through here, weaves over here. If you only look at the brownish areas, they flow so beautifully. So when you're Googling stuff and looking around, this is what should catch your eye, is variety of size. Here we have a nice geometric kind of shape, but it flows into this, so it's not as jarring, geometric, organic. You've got overlap, you've got a sense of depth, you've got value range, you've got a lot of pale value. It's just stunning. And so first thing you'd want to do is render this as many times as you can till it gets familiar. Using the whole page is fine. Creating a border with blue tape is fine. If you're painting on a pad, you don't even need to take the paper off. You might do all three on one. I don't know. It's up to you. But those are the things you want to look for in selection. That's the first one, black and white. Again, it came out a funny color, but this is a gorgeous color for monochromatic, actually. The main thing is we want to avoid gaudy, gaudy, gaudy. And you may have weird purples and greens now, phthalos and teals in your palette. Try to avoid them, or at least put mud or black in them so they're not overpowering, even if the image is overpowering. I like to go ahead and pick an image that's not, so I'm not tempted to go wild like some of those examples I have. People love to kind of destroy flowers with color because they're so colorful. So this would be great for my monochromatic. Beautiful mud tone, but a little orange. Hard to see. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's like a kind of an orangey brown. So I'd probably take a earth tone version of orange if I were doing this as my monochromatic. But let's just say, okay, there's a black and white one because I found this other one. And if you don't have those bold colors because they're not on the list except for optional, you don't even need them. Like if your pink is too red, you don't need the pink. Okay, here we go. All right, another stunning piece. Complicated, yes. Flowers are puzzles. So it's all about getting the shape of these areas and how they relate to one another. And when in doubt, draw the space around and between. If you can get these accurate, the positive space draws itself. So again, variety of size. Try to zoom in. You can even Google macro, M-A-C-R-O, photography of flowers. That way you get more zoomed in. You don't want a giant negative space and like some sunflowers sticking in the middle on a stick facing you. I would avoid daisies and sunflowers. And anything that's flat and staring right at you can be a little bit dull. Well, flat. But if you turn it to its side and you have like a cascading petal in front, it creates depth. And anyway, that's better. So let's say I picked this for my monochromatic. I picked this for my black and white. And this one, okay. When you pick your local color, and I suggest picking all three at the beginning instead of one per session that you do, because you can see if they interact, and then you can be done with the computer part of it. You don't have to keep changing your idea. Now this I found stunning. Local color is the hardest one to find because you see pink, you see yellow, you see just, you'll see on examples it's almost impossible to find local color. Now you can also do leaves, succulents, plants that are flower-ish have petals too. It doesn't have to be traditional roses and tulips and stuff like that. Chrysanthemums, you might want one that's super complex, like a poppy chrysanthemum. You can even do more than one flower together in a setting. If you do one massively complex, you might want the other two to be more simple. It can be a narrative. There's so many ways you can go with this thing. But I'm looking for technique, composition, and accuracy. So this one you have to match the color. Everything I looked at was gaudy and horrible. Finally, I Googled up-close photography of earthy colored flowers. Or I said earth tone, I think I said photos of earth tone flowers. And all of a sudden I got on this succulent direction and I found this. I'm so crazy about it. You know why? It's not just some teal succulent green staring at you. It's on an angle. It has variety of shapes. It has variety of values. And look at this gorgeous color. It looks like red violet chocolate mixed with green. I mean, it's such a stunning combination. And local color is the very most difficult color system there is in any medium, because you have to use all 5 tubes every single time. There's yellow, there's blue, there's red, there's black, and there's white. That's 4 actually in this case. Oh no, 5 because of mud. So it's you want to have everything going on in your palette in the middle. But see how the value shifts in these light areas? It's like you could leave paper here. And so you want to look at here and go, okay, where can I use wet and wet? Where can I use glazing? Where can I put salt? Where can I do even wash? So it's an opportunity to practice all those techniques that we did in the beginning class. This is a gorgeous purpley gray value, and there's this octagonal pot here. And you could leave part of this white and take this color and put it there and get rid of that weird green. Anyway, there's so many things. So it's like strategizing. So first thing, plan your 3. Black and white, monochromatic, local color. Take your time, maybe sketch before you pick your favorites. Now that you have your favorites, you can put them here. And you can also pick a flower down the street or at your house and set that in front of you. Just take a picture, because if it wilts, then it changes. So, okay. So I'm just going to sketch real quick the first step here. Let me make sure you can see this. All right. So I'm going to take one of these. In fact, I'm going to save my first one. So pretty. You know what? I'm going to do this one because this can show you all 3 at the same time. Because even though the first one's just black paint, the second one's just black and one color, and you can choose tertiaries too. You don't have to have pink and red. You could take your palette and do, if you just got a new palette, obviously you got to set it up first, but you know how because we did it before. So you can see on here, it's kind of a mess right now, but And I have some gaudies in here, gaudies that I really do not want to use in this project, unless it's so delicate, like a delicate pink or something. So I have my whole wheel. I have mud and black in the corners. And so for the first project, it's just black and paper. Second project, it's black and one of your hues, which can be tertiaries. You don't have to do red, yellow, blue, orange, green, or purple. You can do red, violet. You could do yellow, orange. But that's monochromatic. Now for local color, exact same process, only more complex with color. The techniques will be very much the same. You have your picture here. Okay. Now I would normally work a lot larger than this because you've got that huge sheet of 15 by 20 paper that you could totally do a different flower for each one. But gesture, think about your drawing classes. You want the big blocked in shape first. You want to figure how far down is this? This is 1, 2, it's a little bit less than a third. So if I'm using this whole page without a border, and I can put a border too, I guess I could put a border here. Now since this picture is a little more rectangular than it is square, I would make my border a little bit more narrow. No need for a grid as long as you eyeball the general width. If you're worried about it, you can measure this, how it printed on the printer, and then duplicate it or double it or halve it, just so you have it. But I feel pretty comfortable with this. And now I'm going to use this pencil light and loose upside down, very barely holding it, which is very gestural. And I can match the angle of this. This thing in the back is important, but it's very faded and weird and far away. I may not want to incorporate that bright of a yellow, green, and green. I don't feel that it would support this. There's a little tie-in green to green. I don't know, I'll think about it later. But I just want to use this as an opportunity to help draw that. So even if I do it harder than it is in terms of pressure, there's this directional angle. Sorry for the barking. The neighbors has a guy over there and the dogs are freaking out. Okay, so see now I'm getting kind of a thing here, kind of like a frog shape. The frog shape ends about here, so I need to lower this a little. I'm just getting started on my observation. This is too low. See how I'm making a big mess, and you can smear it. It helps to add value as you draw. But I'm not going to erase. I'm going to just keep building, and when I feel like I'm getting a little bit closer, I'll start adding different colors, just because I prefer to work that way. See, now I'm getting this curve. And all of this is to avoid the grid. The grid can be pretty stiff, but it's absolutely okay. It gets everything on there in the right spot. You're still going to do this part anyway, but it's just more challenging to do as if you were drawing a figure or still life that you couldn't print. I'm using basic shapes to do. So I basically used this to help me start getting to this. And it's further over than I have it, so I'm just going to fill this so I know that I have it over too far. You know, with gesture, kind of the more messy, the better. It's kind of like when you draw a circle, if you go like that, it's so much better than going like that, because we're human and you can't get it right the first time. So this is my negative space. I don't even need to fill it all the way. I can smear it, whatever. Not erasing, but just smearing. This thing's all dirty anyway. And then you can see in the corner there's a dark, little things like that. Now I can start figuring out where this thing is. It goes from over here clear down to about here, and then it comes all the way over to here. That's a little funky of a moment. I'd probably leave a little gap there for that. But the color was just so cool. So you want to do a big, loose placement of where this thing is and how much space it occupies. and I'm going to use these geometric shapes to block out the sides of this octagon. What you want to do when you have an angle like that, or like over here, is take your pencil and literally roll it over from this angle, roll it over to see where this is. People always get the angles off. Another way is put it there and carefully carry it over there. Or you can put a piece of tape. There's lots of ways. Or you can extend the line and kind of draw in the air. That's really important. Structure is everything, and I can't ever emphasize that enough. I feel like the biggest weakness everybody has that I've seen moving forward from, you know, a 2-year program into a longer program, or even any kind of drawing situation, is the problem is structure. It's just like figure drawing. Everything is basic objects. That's why we start with still life always in art and build onto other subjects, but the subjects are the same thing. They're still basic objects. So you can see I'm kind of working on these angles and extending them, because extended lines are what gives you accuracy, because now you can compare where things hit in relation to each other. Okay, so up here on this little edge I have a leaf coming up here. Now if I start getting too involved with each little leaf, it's going to get completely out of whack and not structural anymore. So now I'm going to break it down to a different size. I don't want to get too small. And again, you see how I'm kind of building around, whoops, and into this. Just to move this a little so you can see a little better. I'm trying to get the idea, but that's better. So I'm kind of comparing, and then if you get up a lot, tape them both to the wall and look, you can really see what's off. I'm going to divide this in half, as you would like doing a portrait or an elliptical object. Because this looks like 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like an octagon or a hexagon or something like that. I forget what they call those, but I'm going to put a dot everywhere I see this thing end. And I'm going to connect them. Almost like a pie. It's just an idea I just had, and I think it's a really helpful one. It also tells me that this thing is a octagon. Interesting. All right. Well, now I know this angle is similar to this angle, and I'll start with this big area, which is like a huge part of it. The size of from the middle to the bottom is way taller than the size from the middle to the top. So if I have the middle in here, I don't want to have this way down here. I want to have this area large. So remember, try not to draw individual flowers. If it really gets out of hand, if you really feel like it's just weird looking, make a grid and just get yourself set up before you get to this part. Ultimately you will though, because things move, but it just might be helpful. Now I'm trying to get the movement and the direction of these things, and anything I can do to help myself, I will. And in fact, I just found a way to help myself. There's a strange little gray gravelly area. It's mushy and hard to see, but in that area there's a little bit of space around that if I fill it, it'll help me figure out where those petals fall. And it goes swoops like this. This is an opportunity to grab another pencil color. See this little area, even though it's not blue, I'm going to use blue because I have blue, and fill it. If you have a scratch print that, for example, it's helpful if you print it in black and white and draw it first and then print it in color. That way you won't get this messy and you can get it out when you're ready to start doing your painting. But if I had a crappy black and white print, whatever, just a scratch paper or one for grid or whatever, I would actually take this pencil and fill it over here too. Just like you would on a grid when you're looking at shapes. Now I can compare this shape with this shape. And I can go, okay, all right, is that all right? Well, it's not perfect, but it's close. And then I see that this thing comes here and it's almost directly in the middle, so I can kind of measure this way. You don't always need a ruler. You can use something like this. So this is slightly right of center based on what I just did. And then you've got this swoopy thing. And again, if you're careful about the scale and getting the paper to match the picture and scale, it'll be helpful. Because this thing now sticks out here. Okay, so we've got this big area here, and then we have this kind of the center of the flower type shape here. And then it kind of emanates like this. So I'm getting to know the way that it moves. And then there's some lines that help me see how things stick out. There's one kind of here, and there's one here, and then the motion of this petal and the motion of this petal. So really what's happening here is sort of a beach ball with a fountain on the top, and that's where everything really is, just spheres and basic objects and negative space. That little piece right there I could fill in right here. So I could continue drawing now with blue, and then I could switch to another color, but I'm not quite there yet because I haven't done enough with the regular pencil. I've got this point here, I've got this red thing here, I've got the ledge is a little bit wider on the edge than I have it. This petal here. So again, flowers are very tricky because they're puzzles. I mean, everything's a puzzle, but you sometimes even have to count how many leaves there are. Like if you were doing drawing a screwdriver and a screw, and the screw had little wraps around it, you'd have to count how many there were to get it to look accurately. It's not something you can really fake. And again, if you feel like you're just winging it and it's not looking right, just go back to the grid and carefully draw it so that you don't end up with the wrong amount of flowers even. This is a very complex selection, but the color is so dynamic to me, I had to do it. I just had to do it. Here's another example right there of, I can fit the blue and see how it falls around this. Kind of using blue where the white is in this case. And if this was scratch paper, I'd fill that too. I just don't want to ruin it because I really like the way that color came out on the printer. I was really surprised. This also shows me now I might need to adjust this, etc. Because one thing leads to another, and you're better off getting bigger as you go than smaller, because things tend to get smaller as you go. It just is just the way it goes. So keep getting bigger as you draw so that it doesn't shrink over time. It's like a lot of people start a portrait and then it becomes this tiny little head when it started out this large oval shape. And then, you know, another thing you can do is draw through things. Like get that general size. Imagine how big that petal would be if you drew through it. And now I'm starting to count. I'm like, okay, how many are there? I'm starting to have a relationship with this. Very, very slowly. And of course, take lots of breaks. And see how I'm just adding more value, more pressure, instead of erasing? That's what gesture is. This is called an organizational drawing. You can never have enough reiteration. I mean, it's not a drawing class, it's a painting class, but drawing is basically painting is drawing with paint. Even when you get into more abstract techniques. Still want to have a solid foundation. And then I always keep a little pencil sharpener on hand so I can keep going like that. But there's a similar demo when you do one of your other projects. Again, it's not the subject that matters. It's the technique and the accuracy. And you can always use value. For example, this is dark. You can use value to measure. People think value is just for depth or texture or whatever, volume. This is actually a tool for drawing. By starting to block in these values on these chocolatey leaves down there, I can start seeing the shapes and if they're accurate and adjusting them. And again, if it's off, reach for another color. You know, when you exhaust the blue, reach for a red. And you can double check. And little by little, you're going to start getting more comfortable and committed to the lines that you made. And you'll be able to draw these and then transfer them onto your paper. Or you feel comfortable enough to lightly transfer visually this to another paper. There's something about having drawn it before that makes it a little bit better. And again, a lot of watercolorists, real professional ones, still use carbon. So don't beat yourself up if you have to draw, and then get a piece of carbon paper to transfer it. Nothing wrong with that. But at least this step, you avoid the grid and just use it as needed. And I will continue this until it's rendered, and then I will transfer it, and then I'll do some techniques. Or at least some of it I'll transfer so you can see. But I think that's enough. All right, so that's it. And you're going to do that for all 3 floral projects. And you could even, if you wanted to, and you're having a good drawing day, you could draw them all. You could draw all 3, transfer all 3, get it all out of the way, and just sit down with your palette. That would be a cool approach. You know, if you're really in the mood to draw and you're doing well that day or that week, that way the drawing part is resolved and you can move on to these really cool techniques and color systems. See you soon.